the easy way to double your portfolio and exit your W-2 in the next 3 to 5 years. That's what we're going to talk about today. A lot of other stuff related to that, but that's the main topic. Before we get into that, we always love a good W-2 prison break story. Jay has one, and I'm going to let him tell it in your words. Just, tell us about your journey and how you got to the point where you were, DMing me on LinkedIn to get on
Yeah.
the show and help people exit their W-2.
Yeah. So I spent 20 years in corporate America climbing that corporate ladder, right? Had visions of being a VP. I never wanted to be a president. I always wanted to be VP of a big company very early in my career. I was in the IT industry and I found myself after a couple of employment changes, a principal at a small startup. And we built the thing up. I was not part of the ownership, but I was one of the very first employees there. Built it up, and it was sold. The company was sold. I went along with the new company, and that's really where my focus started. Like, okay, this acquisition's gone very horrible. I'm not making any money. We're living paycheck to paycheck. We just found out my wife was pregnant with our first. I'm like, something's got to change, right?
Yeah.
Something has got to change, and that's the Rich Dad Poor Dad Bible for all new investors. That's where I got my hands on that. And fast forward, I was telling this story to my son actually. He's now not about to be 9, and he asked me the other day. He said, Dad, when did you decide that you were going to be a real estate investor? I was like, well, actually, it was right when we found out that we were pregnant with you. And as a matter of fact, we closed on our very first property when you were 3 weeks old. I was like, there's no way you're going to remember that. But and he kind of lit up and he was excited about hearing that story. And so since then, that first one we were hooked and we just started buying very inexpensive. And I know that's a funny word to say in today's market, but very inexpensive rentals and kept building our portfolio and building our portfolio. And then about 6 years later, more acquisitions, more mergers in the corporate world. COVID hits, and I find myself on the end of a pink slip from in May of 2020 for and I'm using air quotes for people who are just listening, right? For COVID related reasons. And at that moment, I wasn't expecting it, but it's the best kick in the pants that I ever received, best motivator I ever received because it made me look at me like, all right, we're actually good. We're going to be okay. You know, took some encouragement from my wife to make me realize that because I see a 6-figure income that just went completely away, which we were living off of that in our investments. We weren't doing anything with except for just recycling, putting it back into newer opportunities and upcoming opportunities. So that was 3 years ago, and we've made quite a few lifestyle changes to make that happen. Number one, we converted our primary house, which is where I'm sitting now, into a B&B. And so during the busy season, we're in Florida, not far from the beach. During the busy season, we travel. This is a rental. It does very well on B&B, and so we homeschool our kids. We travel. We've been to almost half of the continental states. So it has been, go along with the show of your title, Prison Break. I would have loved to have been, prideful and saying, hey, I did this. I took the leap of faith, but really it took my boss and the company I was working for at the time basically just to kick me out of the airplane. And luckily I had that parachute on, right?
Yeah. Well, you were also preparing for it because you bought your first properties while you were still
Yeah.
in the W-2. So tell me about, we'd love to hear about the first. That was a great story. And I have a lot to unpack there, but tell me about the first deal that you did, like how you found it, where it was, and just maybe some of
Oh
the
man.
balance issues with working a busy W-2 and trying to manage rentals.
Yeah. So the way we found it, we burned through a bunch of realtors to
Mm.
find it. We would reach out to realtors trying to find stuff on MLS. Wasn't real big into trying to wholesale or do any off market campaigns.
Yep.
The job I had was just very highly demanding. I traveled, no, it was day trips, but I traveled, 25, 50% of the time. So I was
Yep.
going a lot, which allowed me to listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of audiobooks, right? But our first property, we burned through a lot of realtors who said they were investor friendly, but when it came down to it, they were not comfortable making the offers that met our criteria, right? property be, listed for, let's say, $100,000, and we would underwrite him like, our offer, actually our target price is about 50 grand, so we want to start at 40. And we're like, well, I'm not doing that. And I finally found a realtor who didn't care. He did not care what the asking price. Our values aligned.
Mhm.
And so not only did we close that first property with him, but we ended up closing another 15 transactions with him because of this. And he started realizing kind of what we were buying, how we were going about it and underwriting it. And so when deals would come up to him before they would hit the market, he would bring them to us knowing that we could close on pretty quickly. And we got some really great deals out of working with them. And so that was the first one. And the first one we bought, purchase price, people are going to laugh at this, but it was $25,000 for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath house, right? We were trying to get started, and it was on that edge. It was on one of those streets where houses coming up the street have been purchased and remodeled.
Mhm.
And you could just you could almost see the progression going that way. And so that we bought it with the idea that, we had a 3-week-old baby. We were going to do all the renovations ourselves.
Yep.
And it was going to be fine. Didn't didn't happen that way. We didn't know
Course
what
not.
new parents would know, right?
Yep.
We got a little crazy looks when we told folks that was a game plan. They're like, but you're a new parent? I'm like, yeah, fine. I'm working, weekends, nights, be fine. And anyway, that property became available to rent in February. Is when we finally got it ready. And kind of a side note there, I went back and I was like, okay, here's what contractors, quoted us at, and I said no to.
Yeah.
I was like, but if they would have done it in their 4 to 6 week time frame, and we would have placed a tenant not too long after that, we would be ahead. We would be ahead as far as gross revenue coming in
Yep.
versus what we had spent. And I was like, so just outsource what you need to outsource, right? But it was a great experience, great story to tell from that. And we just, went from that. We had a really great tenant at the time. And luckily, because we didn't know what we were doing, self-managing, I didn't want to hire a property manager. We instantly got hooked and said, okay, how do we do more of these? Right.
How did you buy that one? Did you pay cash? Did you use financing? I mean, how did you acquire?
We used cash, but it was from a home equity line of credit from our primary house that we were living in at the time.
Got it.
And
Very
so,
popular, very common way for people to
yeah,
get involved, right? Is to leverage your primary residence.
yeah, it was a good, because we did that, and I think the interest rate then was probably around 7% for the HELOC.
Okay.
And I mean, after all expenses done, we were still cash flowing over $300 a month.
Got it. So $300 a month cash flowing, you essentially have no money in the deal because that is a HELOC is other people's money. So you got no money
Yeah.
in the deal. You're cash flowing 300 a month. Do you still have that? And have you since maybe repaid the HELOC back, or like, what's the strategy there?
We held on to it for 3 years,
Yeah.
and then we ended up putting it on the market when we had a tenant transition. That perfect tenant, she moved out. We had a tenant transition. I was like, hey, let's try to sell this. Let's just see what we can get. It didn't sell. So we placed another tenant, increased rent. We're still cash flowing, still fine. And then out of the blue, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, are you still trying to sell that property over there in West Pensacola? And I said, for the right price, I'll sell it. And they offered me 50 for it. And I said, I took it. And so basically what we did with that is we closed on that, and we did a 1031 exchange into a fourplex that we still own today, that we're
Nice.
doing in the middle of a huge remodel project with that one.
What would you do differently? Because you've obviously you were forced to exit the W-2, but you probably would have gotten to that point anyways with your rentals and your real estate portfolio. So when we're looking at doubling your portfolio in 3 to 5 years, or I don't know what your timeline is, again, the topic that you
Yeah.
brought to me, it's like, how do we go about doing that when we're working a busy W-2? We got family, we don't have enough time. We're going to talk about time and excuses as well, but just kind of
Yeah.
walk us through how we're going to do this, Jay.
It is so simple. And when I start explaining this, most people, they roll their eyes. They're like, this it's not that simple. And I'm like, but it is, because we have a community of the folks who are doing it. And the reason why I can share those numbers with you is because I can give you 10 specific examples of people who joined our community, 3 years ago. Some of them had just started investing, and some of them were on their way, right? They had bought a couple of properties, and in that 3 to 5 year mark, they had doubled their portfolio, and they had not only doubled their portfolio, but they were able to break out of the W-2 prison. And so it's backed by real data. And when I started seeing it, I was like, all right, the analytical side of my brain started kicking. I was like, all right, what's the secret sauce? Because so far this is just a community for people to get together online, right? And so when I started doing it, I was like, all right, what his name? Hal Elrod. Sorry, forgot his name. Hal Elrod has labeled growth friends, right? A lot of people don't know what that means, and they maybe have some, gray definition of what that is. But here's how I label growth friends in the real estate investing world: is growth friends are people who you talk to about growing your portfolio, talk about how to grow your wealth, your income, providing a legacy, right? And for your family, and that's it. It's really the only 4 or 5 topics that you talk about. And for the sake of this exercise, everybody else is what we call a maintenance relationship, right? So you got growth friends, you got maintenance relationships. And so in the growth friends exercise, this is what I ask people to do. And if you're listening or watching, I want you to follow along. Basically, you just get out a sheet of paper, right? It doesn't matter how big, but you're going to make 2 columns. Left-hand column is maintenance for growth friends. Right-hand column is maintenance relationships. You pick up your phone, right? And you go through the last 20 phone calls that you made or received. And if you talked about one of those 4 or 5 things about building wealth, rental properties, growing your portfolio, you put them down into the growth friends column, right? Everybody else goes into the maintenance relationships, right? Once you get done with your phone calls, then you go to your text messages, because most of us text these days, right? Instead of calling. You do the same exact exercise. And most people who struggle with deal flow or finding their next rental or doing, anything of building true wealth and trying to break out of prison, they look at that list, and can you guess which side is heavier? Almost 9 times out of 10.
Maintenance, 100%.
Maintenance relationship. And the sucky thing about this is maintenance relationships also include your family, right? Your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, whoever that's not talking about building wealth, growing your real estate portfolio. Because I look at who my growth friends are, there's not a family member over there. They all still think I'm crazy. I love my parents to death, but they still ask me, hey, Jay, when are you going to get a real job?
Yeah.
Like, I was laid off 3 years ago, like we're traveling, we're spending more time with our kids than most people get to, in a month, and most people do in a year. And I was like, I don't see it happening. I don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't see me going back.
No, 100% not. I mean, why would you? That was just simply awesome. That's an exercise that everyone should go through. I'm going to go through that. So thank you for sharing that. If I'm listening to this right now, I've heard you mention your online community, and they're probably saying my ears perked up. I'm sure theirs did too. Talk about your online community, and where can we learn more about it?
Yeah, so the community basically, I get a lot of people say, well, I don't have people that I can put in the growth friends column, right? And we kept hearing that. And quite frankly, the community started out because I'm a technology nerd. Right now, I've grown out of my introverted personality, but starting out,
Yeah.
I knew the way that we had closed on a couple of properties, and I was like, all right, we've got the bug, but we really want to scale. How do we scale? And I started talking to my friends, coworkers, and did not talk to my family about it because I already knew their stance on it. And I'm like, but if I'm going to grow, I got to get around other people. And there was a local RIA here, but it was 45 minutes away. Wife was, she was pregnant with number 2 at the time, I believe, and I'm starting to have some complications. So I didn't want to leave her alone for 4 or 5 hours if I didn't have to. And so, I was like, and I joined an online community, not real estate related, but I saw what they were doing. I was like, I'm a pretty smart guy for technology. I can just do this for real estate investing. So the W2 capitalist community was born, and that's just morphed over the years into what it is today. And it's really just an online, it's a very boutique place for, and we focus on busy parents, right? So busy parents who are married and they've closed at least one deal, right? They've gotten the bug and they want to double their portfolio. And so we have a couple of different things that we do that I think makes us unique is when somebody comes in and asks a question, and this could be in, our online community or on a virtual call similar to this. The only way that that question gets answered is from somebody who has experience dealing exactly with that. There's a wide range of experience and just different scenarios. And so the other thing that we do that I feel like makes us unique is when somebody answers that question. If you don't know, like Brian, I ask a question and you respond and you say, well, hey, here's how I would handle this. We want real life experience because and it just drives those connections. And what happens inside that community is those connections build, then just organically people partner. And it goes back to the growth friends list. Now you're engaged with your community that's talking about building wealth, building your portfolio, growing your income streams. And it just organically happens. So when I say it's easy to double, like you still have to put in the work, right?
Sure.
Everybody's got to put in the work. But the easy part is you evaluate who you're hanging around with, who you're spending your time with, and just realize that has to change.
Let's stay on this a little bit because this is important about who you spend your time with and how you spend your time as well, because a lot of folks out there, and we're calling them out, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Popular excuse I made it for decades. So I was trying to leave my job is I don't have time for that. I don't have time to do real estate. I'm married. I got a kid. I got stuff I'm doing. I'm busy. I'm traveling 100,000 miles a year. I'm sure you've heard it all. You might have made a couple of those. So what would you say, or how would you address that? You just talked about the people, but again, how we're spending our time. What advice would you lend to the listeners?
Yeah. So, we were talking before the record button and that was hit, and you said, hey, what really gets you going? I was like, excuses. Yeah, excuses get me going because I've probably made them all. And typically they're not excuses, they're just objections, right? Because you're not willing to give up the comfort of, sitting down on Sundays. And I'm guilty as this as ever. Sitting down on Saturdays or Sundays in the fall and watching 10, 12 hours of football and doing nothing else. Well, if I did that on Saturday and Sunday, there's 20 hours that I could, and here's the trick. It takes about 30 minutes a day to get going on this path, right? And what most people do, what I advise them is take 30 minutes of your lunch break every day, make 2 phone calls. Some of them you're not going to connect with. Some of them are only going to last 10 minutes, right? Make 2 phone calls to people who are on the growth friends list. And when you get tired of talking about them, add to it, right? Just keep. And one of the best questions is, you sit down and you talk to somebody who's on the growth friends list, and you're talking about real estate investing. You're like, look, I'm trying to expand my network. Who do you know that I should probably be talking to? Simple ask question. They may tell you, I don't know anybody. Chances are that's not going to happen, right? Yeah. The excuse thing really does get me going. I can almost find, and there is, I think at the end of this we're going to give some links, but there's a link for you to schedule time with me. If you are sitting there and say, Jay, I just don't have 30 minutes a day. That's total bullshit. I'm going to find at least an hour a day. Now, there's been one case where I was not able to find available time when I went through this exercise. Now, this lady, she was a single mom. Mm-hmm. She had 4 kids and she was working 2 jobs. And I was like, you know what? And we went through how she was spending her day. I was like, you're right. You have no time whatsoever. And because I've never been in your situation, I don't have that experience. I can't speak to how to help you, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of when
she probably wasn't making a bunch of excuses though, Jay.
No, they were not excuses. They were just like,
yeah,
you're busy. Like, I get it. Like, you need some help. I don't know how to get you there. I can't, that's why we focus on busy parents because, my wife and I, we've got 3 kids, all under 8, and we homeschool, we travel. So the excuses are they're objections to get rid of that comfortable lifestyle that we all tend to
I,
migrate toward and never get out of.
I love that. I'm highlighting that. Give me an example or two. Give us an example or two, or how you've been able to add an hour back in somebody's day. Because again, you said 30 minutes is all it takes to get started in this.
Yeah. Well, so part of it is who are you talking to and spending your time with. Most people can find that 30 minutes and they're just simply adjusting that. The other thing is you go to work, right? You got kids, maybe you drop them off to school, maybe you're homeschooling them, but you're going to work. You may be working from home, but at the end of the day, you're mentally exhausted. The only thing you want to do is plop down in front of the TV and just absorb and not really do anything, right? I get it. I get it. So this is where if you want to get really aggressive at this, is you change and you get up earlier, right? Now I don't want a lot of people to tune out right now because I'm saying get up earlier. I'm also saying go to bed earlier,
Yep.
right? And so instead of staying up, because I'm not perfect at this. Last night I'm rewatching Peaky Blinders, right? It's a great show. I love it. I was up till 12:30 last night watching because I got hooked. I got hooked into it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and the little thing popped up and said, "Are you still watching?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess I am. I need to go to bed." And I got up late this morning. It's so I'm not perfect, but I also don't provide the excuse of, well, I don't have time,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so it does. I think it starts with most people reducing the amount of time they watch TV and making that shift to doing real estate investing activities earlier in the day, because at the end of the day, you're exhausted. Your kids and your spouse are pulling you in different directions, and really you just want to sit there and kind of veg out because you've had a stressful day at work,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you really, if when you get serious about this, you make that shift to doing real estate investing activities. And here's another trick that I learned along the way is, if you normally get up at 7, I'm not saying get up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, because you might do that for a couple of days, but you're going to eventually fail, right? Because your body's not used to it. And you're probably still going to be staying up till midnight watching whatever documentary series you want to watch, but treat it as an exercise. And so instead of saying, I'm going to start getting up at 2 hours earlier, get up 15 minutes earlier. Do that for a couple of weeks, then get up 15 minutes earlier than that. But on the flip side of that is you're also setting a bedtime alarm. So you're not, up till 12:30 eating Wingstop and watching Peaky Blinders, right? Is you're also setting a bedtime alarm to start going to bed 15 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're making your body physically adjust to your environment.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where you really start. Like when I had the W2, I mean, I was getting up at 4:30 very routinely, most of the time before my alarm ever went off. I got a good 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours in of real estate investing activities. And then the rest of the house started waking up. Right. And once the rest of the house started waking up, mind you, 3 kids, wife, my day was shot. Right. Like that time I had to focus on building wealth and building our legacy was
Right.
gone, because I had about 30 minutes with them and then I was off to the W2. Right.
Yeah.
And by the time I got home, mentally, physically exhausted.
You were
Didn't want to do
cooked.
anything.
So the
Yeah.
takeaways there for me, Jay, for the audience is number one, it's baby steps. So you don't have to wake up tomorrow at 4:30. You can, if you're waking up
Yeah.
at 6, wake up at 5:45, go to bed 15 minutes later or earlier, sorry. And just stack on that, like winning days, stack a bunch of good days together. And ultimately you continue to do that. And you give yourself a period of time, like 3 years, you're going to win. You're going to win your life. And
Yeah.
that's what it's all about. Can we still do real estate deals in this market? I've been meaning to ask you that. I mean, everyone's, panicking and talking about the market. I hear it all the time. I mean, can we still do deals in this market?
We can. We are doing them. One of the things that when somebody brings up recession or whatever trending buzzword you want to put in there, I know immediately that they're hooked into the mainstream media news. And that's another way to get back a lot of mental space, is just to unplug, go cold turkey, just turn that crap off. But yes, we can. So one of the things that has spun up out of our community is I kept hearing, folks in our community saying, look, I've got this really great deal, but they had trouble finding funding, right? Or didn't really know how to navigate hard money lending and whatnot. So one of the things that we we did as a group, I got together with a couple of guys who'd been in the community for a few years. One of them has specific, like he was a broker, and so we created W2 Cap Capital, which is a hard money lending solution for our community, right? And for our networks. We are funding deals. Like we closed on 2 deals yesterday, and these are fix and flip deals. And we have a handful that we're servicing now to the tune of about 2.2 million that we're servicing now. That's new construction, fix and flips, and to the point where we're extending that whole portfolio to be able to offer like DSCR rental loans and some transactional funding for wholesalers and stuff like that. So yes, there are deals that happen. Now, what I will say is with current market conditions, what we're seeing is it's weeding out a bunch of people who are not serious about building their wealth and being focused.
Yeah.
And that just, the low hanging fruit and the easy picking days, they're at least on pause right now.
Sure. You got to work a little
Yeah.
bit. You got to work a little bit harder. You got to be a little bit more consistent. And I just love it when I hear, prices are too high, interest rate recession, 70,000 realtors exited the market. Like I love hearing that stuff because I know it's just because as long as we stay the course and stay the path, there's always going to be deals. Always in every market, every single state. Like you can't do deals in San Diego. It's like, yeah, you can. Can't do deals in Florida. Yes, you can. We just mentioned one. So I don't buy into that nonsense. That's just, and I'm with you. Unplug the TV and stop listening to the talking heads.
Where we closed that deal yesterday, we also had one of our mastermind calls last night, and one of our members who's in Florida and South Florida, where there's no deals, interest rates are crazy, insurance costs are crazy, and she came on there. And she goes, "Hey, I got a verbal approval on a 7 unit," and I was like, "How'd you find it?" And she said, "Well, it's a friend. What is she? It's a friend or a friend of a friend." And so, just to kind of circle back.
Yeah.
I know this member. She's constantly talking to her friends about here's what I want, here's what I'm looking for. Back to that growth friends, list and having those conversations. And she has almost doubled her portfolio just this year. And she has. I'm sorry, she has. So she went from, oh man, I forgot the numbers, but it was like 30. She's up to, with this one, I think it was 64 units just in the last year. So in this last year where interest rates have been crazy and you can't find deals, and she's done it.
Awesome.
So there are deals to be had in every market. You gotta figure out where they are. And that's totally the frustrating part for most.
Sometimes you just gotta look, that's helpful when you just look. All right. We've talked a lot about your awesome community. So where do we go, Jay? Because I know the listeners are chomping at the bit to get in touch with you. So what's the best move for them moving forward?
Yeah. So w2capitalist.com is the landing page. And we just put out this new little video like pop up. It's very small. It's in the corner, and it provides like links to all the commonly asked questions or frequently asked questions there. And so I'll point you guys to that. That's where you can schedule a call with me. You can find out more about the community. We can dive into why you have the excuse that I have no time if you're bold enough to have that conversation with me. Or we can underwrite a deal. I love underwriting deals. I love looking at new markets and really challenging people, because most of the time when I do these one-on-one underwritings, I want the practice, right? But I don't know about, most of the time I don't know about their markets. So it's really, I love asking those questions about, all right, how much rent is a 2-1 going to get in this market?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, well, you probably need to know that.
Exactly.
But
well, it sounds like, something that, the listeners should take advantage of. Hey guys, if you want, this is the WT Prison Break show. All right. If you're interested in real estate, you want to double your portfolio and exit your W2 in the next 3 to 5 years, I would highly encourage you to get in touch with Jay. A lot of value added to this episode. As we wrap up here, Jay, this has been tremendous. Is there anything that you wanted to share? Any final thoughts? Maybe something I didn't ask you that you wanted to just leave with us before we go?
Well, so where our community is focused on people who have closed at least a deal, right? And that's a recent change in focus for us because there are many resources out there that want to help people get started in real estate investing. Really, where we've kind of found our niche is helping people who have closed the deal and they've got that bug and they really want to double, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I do have a book that's geared toward, I would say, newbie investors, but people who really, and experienced investors get this too, that experience that paralysis analysis. They don't know if they're doing it right or they talk themselves out of a deal or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so it's an Amazon bestseller. And now I'm to the point where I'm just giving it away. And so you can go to makeanofferbook.com. I think, Brian, you have that link. If you don't, I can send it to you. But it's makeanofferbook.com and I'll ship you a free one.
Awesome. Well, definitely, he's an Amazon bestseller too, folks. I mean, it just gets better and better. We'll leave that link in the show notes. Jay, we're definitely going to have you back on the show, and because I'm really excited to see how your community continues to grow and more stories. You're creating cool stories. That's super important. Thanks for your time, all the value. I got a bunch of notes, and everyone make it a great day.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.